I'm here with George Stroumboulopoulos, Mr. Stroumboulopoulos, Sir George.
Sir George is George Martin from the, yeah, no, I just call me George, obviously.
Okay, George. So starting from the basics, when you were a little boy,
Yes.
What did you want to be when you grew up? And feel free to say anything from ninja to dinosaur.
Never wanted to be a ninja because I don't have any athletic ability. Never wanted to be a dinosaur because I was raised by a born-again Christian woman, and so dinosaurs weren't even real to Christians until I got older and went, wait a minute, what are these bones? What do you mean? The Bible's wrong? What do you mean? I had, if you can believe this, no ambition ever. At a certain point, I thought, maybe I'll be an architect. I love design, so I wanted to become a graphic designer, become an architect. But what happened, and that was going to be the plan to the second half of my high school run. But I got kicked out of art classes. Like, they wouldn't even let me take them, based on, I was not, yeah, I had issues. But yeah, so the art teacher wouldn't let me in the arts program, and I failed math and chemistry, so I failed my sciences and my maths. So I dropped them, and because of that, I was unable to pursue a career in architecture at the time. So I was 17 years old, man, and I was done. I had nothing. I joined the Army Reserves on a dare. I legitimately had no plan. I was working as an usher at a movie theater, and I thought maybe I'll be an assistant manager at the theater, but no career plan whatsoever.
Did your parents push you into having a plan, or?
I was raised by my mom, and I give her credit, you know, my mother never really gave me the gears about it. I remember only once, coming home from school, and she had looked at my report card and said, you know, at some point we need to talk about this report card, because it was abysmal. It was as if I was a golfer and I was aiming for the lower score. Like, it was that bad. But that was only once. She never, ever gave me a hard time about my grades. She never really talked to me about what I would do for a living. She never put any pressure on me for that at all. I think she kind of understood that, like, life's hard. You know, and life's hard, and there's so many things to worry about. Just try to get through it. You know, I don't understand why kids in high school now have to pick career paths. It's insane. You're dealing with your first breakup, you know, your first love. You don't know your emotions yet. You're figuring that stuff out. You're dealing with the pressure of what school to go to. You've got all these things you have to deal with that you're also expected to come up with a plan that's going to serve you for 50 years. That's insanity. That's proper insanity. And so, maybe subconsciously I picked that up from my mom, that I never had that stuff. She's never, I mean, I'm 39. She hasn't even pressured me to bring home a grandkid. She tells me not to. She's like, don't get married, don't have kids. Like, you know, straightforward. So no pressure whatsoever. I didn't know my dad that well at all, really, so he never really weighed into it. But, yeah, it just sort of happened. Well, I remember when I told her that I was going to go in fact, I had applied to Humber College for radio broadcasting, and it was the only school and the only program that I applied for. I didn't even talk to her about it before. I just applied because whatever, right? It's my life, I'll just do it. And she looked at me, she goes, what is that, radio? What's your backup plan? And I said, I don't have a backup plan because I don't really care. If this works out, awesome. If it doesn't, whatever, man. I'll drive a forklift, you know, and that was it. And I was driving a forklift, so it worked for me.
Yeah. Architect and radio host, like, where did that come from? Where did you decide to do that?
Well, I suppose, you know that whole cliche about life's what happens while you're busy making plans, right? So while I was out there thinking I was going to be an architect, in actual fact, what I was listening to the radio pretty intently, you know. Yeah. And again, it was an accident, right? I come from a single parent home, but with a good family, super Ukrainian and Polish family on that side. So they would take me to my aunt's house, and they, they're Eastern Europeans, so they got liquored up. There was a lot of booze. What that meant was the adults would party, right? And they weren't just like adults, they were grandparents too, like they get done in. And my mother wasn't a drinker, right? And so she wanted to kind of protect me from the madness that was this. So she'd put me in the kitchen, and one of the guys, the elderly cats in the home, had a radio that had a shortwave on it. And so it had a little, like, brass and a tin-colored map. And so because Mom knew that I loved maps and I loved design. So I would sit there and I would just move the dial past the map. And I would look at this country and this country. But what was happening, it's radio, so I'm tuning in different radio stations. And I'm picking stuff up, and I discovered a rock station in Toronto called Q107. I was about 5 years old, and I remember tuning in, and they were doing some really over-the-line stuff about, like, illicit drug use, and colossal parties, and it stuck in my head. So I was into radio from that moment on, you know. And I just didn't know you could do it for a living. Like, I just had no idea it was a career plan, you know.
Yeah. So when you did get started, you know, and that started to roll, did a plan start to formulate that, hey, one day I'm going to be George Stroumboulopoulos?
Never, man. In fact, they wouldn't even let me be George Stroumboulopoulos because they said I was out in BC and I was told I was actually told this by people that the ethnic name might fly in Toronto, but out in the Okanagan Valley, not so much. So early 90s. I'm an old man, right? So early 90s. So I tried to pull a fast one on them and change my name to George Jefferson from the Jeffersons. And if you're old enough, you'll know that it was this amazing loudmouth character on television, one of the first families that was a black family on TV in America, right, as the lead. So I thought George Jefferson, this outspoken African-American man, that's what I'm going to be. They didn't fall for that either. No, I mean, I was going to be overnight radio. That was the deal. I love radio. I love music. And, you know, but I got into radio in the dark ages, you know, when the music was terrible. Like, I was there in the early 90s, but when I started to have any impact on the radio, it was by the mid to late 90s, and music was terrible on the radio. And I didn't realize you couldn't pick your own songs, that it was a program director and a music director that picked your songs, and I just didn't really want to do that. And that's right around the time, so that was about maybe 8 years in, 7, 8 years in, when Much Music called me, right? And so even then I didn't think about going to Much because I didn't have cable. I didn't watch much music. I didn't.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, as far as I knew, they played boy bands, man, and that's not my steez. If I was a 13-year-old girl, I would have identified with Much, but I didn't, right? So, but they offered me the New Music, which is a TV show that I had watched because it used to air on a channel called City TV in Toronto. So without cable, you could watch it, and that's how I heard, you know, Joe Strummer call rock and roll a con. That's when I heard about the Jesus and Mary chain, getting into fights. Like, I learned about music then. So then it just happened. So TV was never. And CBC, are you kidding me, man? I never even picked up the phone when they called. Like, I didn't, because I didn't know that there would be a home for a guy like me at CBC. Yeah. Thank God I was wrong, because CBC's been amazing to work at. It's so much fun.
Awesome. Jumping back to your name, you talked about that a little bit. Obviously now it's well known across Canada as Canada's boyfriend. But when you were younger, was it a, you know, focus for bullying?
I don't think I was. I mean, people used to make fun of my last name and call me nicknames because of my last name, but I didn't feel like I was bullied because of my last name because I grew up in a super ethnic neighborhood. Oh, okay. So who was going to make fun of my last name? The guy with the Italian last name, or the guy with the Indian last name, or the guy with the Pakistani last name, which was often close, or the guy with the Portuguese last name? There were very few WASPs in my neighborhood, right? There were some Scots, and you know, some, you know, that kind of Canadian Irish Scot kind of version in English, but everybody in my hood was super ethnic. Who's going to make fun of me? The Jamaican guy? Like, no. I mean, I went to school, you know, if you knew a guy called Marshawn, you know, like, Marshawn can't make fun of Stroumboulopoulos, right? You know, and, you know, Grilloni can't make fun of. And my one friend who had a super, like, straight up fake WASP name, we knew that his father, you know, his grandfather changed it because he escaped from Germany because his father was part of some bad business. So we knew that his name was fake. So who's going to make fun of you? You know, bullying happened for different reasons, obviously, but yeah, but never from my name. I couldn't even spell my name until I was in grade 5. That's very true. Grade 5 is when I learned.
So you transitioned from forklifting to radio.
But I really identified as being a movie theater usher.
Oh,
that's
okay.
kind of my best job I've ever had.
My apologies. Okay, yeah. Movie theater usher to radio to Much Music to hosting your own show. Was that, because I mean, when you were on the radio, you were part of something else. When you were on Much Music, you were part of a Much Music show. But starting your own show, was that kind of like a, you know, because it could go or it could drop? Yeah,
luckily, I don't have an ego. And I really don't have an ego about it, because if I did have even a little bit of ego, I might have succumbed to the pressure of that. I remember being on the phone with my manager at the time, a guy called Michael. I had when CBC was asking me to come over and do this, and I had said no to CBC. I didn't want to do it, right? I didn't believe that it would work. I didn't know any of that stuff. And he said to me, well, here's the thing, dude. You're going to get fired anyway in a month if you start this show. So why don't we just do it? It was a long conversation in my head to get to. It was actually Rain Maida from Our Lady Peace who was the one that said, I think you should do this job. Nobody in my life said I should do this job. Not my then girlfriend, not even, she was like one of what was best for me, but she didn't want to get too heavily involved because she knew it was a really personal choice. My best friends weren't really sure what to do, but it was Rain who said something that I thought, oh, maybe I could Maybe I could. So I was in, no word of a lie, in a field in Darfur on a satellite phone, and I'd called Michael, and I said, dude, what do you think? He goes, yeah, man, you're going to get fired in a month. And I was like, and there's a war going on, right? I'm like, I think you're right. He's like, so you'll get fired, a big deal, at least we tried. And I'm like, right, because here's what Rain said to me that really stuck with me. Probably won't work, your show. Probably won't. Likely won't. But if it does, you'll have pulled something off. If you can pull a show like this off in your country of birth on the CBC, where content really matters. It's not about driving up the shareholder value of the private investor. It's about the quality of a conversation with the Canadian people, as diverse as it is, as complicated as it is. So he said, yeah, it probably won't work, but man, if it does, wow, that would be cool. If I could give advice to anybody who, not to upcoming broadcasters, because you'll be fine on your own just being you. But to the people who are up-and-coming bosses, those people have a vision. Support your talent. Let them find their voice. Up-and-coming bosses are the ones that need the advice. Up-and-coming broadcasters will find their way.
Cool. So you, switching things around here, have done a lot of traveling for various charities that you're involved in. You've been to Africa, just all around the world. Did you ever see yourself doing that? I mean, it sounds like you didn't see yourself doing much more than ushering, but I mean.
You're right. I'm from the generation, and we might even be the last generation of aspirational viewers and aspirational readers. Like I didn't grow up watching people my own age on television, and I never wanted to. I didn't want to watch bands or listen to bands that were my age. I didn't want to read books written by people my age. I didn't want to hear my story or my friend's story on TV. Why? I don't give a shit about that story. I have that life. Yeah. So I wanted to learn about people who are older, people who are more traveled, both figuratively and literally. And so I read National Geographic, and so I read Sherlock Holmes, and so I read about other worlds, I wasn't a super sci-fi guy. I was into real things, right? Even Sherlock, as fantastical as it was, felt real. It felt like it was about deduction, right? So when I go around the world now for trips, I kind of have that feeling like, right, I guess this is natural because I'm a curious person and I'm an empathetic person, so I want to see the world from other people's points of view, so why wouldn't I go around the world? But never in a million years. My God, I mean, when I worked at Much Music, when I first went there, I had been on a plane twice by the time I was 28 years old. Because I could never afford a plane. Once we took a trip with the family down to Dominican Republic, and once when I was 14, I got on a little prop plane. We went to Quebec City. Like, I legitimately had no travel experience, except for road trips. I drove to Los Angeles when I was 18. I drove all across Canada. Like I've done drive one way or the other to LA 16 times in my life. Like I'm a road trip guy, bikes and the cars, whatever. But planes, no way. I got as much music like you're flying. I went, I'm what? I'd barely been on a plane in my life, Yeah. So the first time you go to Africa, it's a thing, man. Yeah. And then when you go to Northern Africa and you realize, Africa's a complicated place with many countries and many stories and many realities. But the difference between Sub-Saharan Africa and Arab North Africa, very different, right? Very different. And it's nice to see the world that way. Yeah. It is.
Cool. We're running out of time, but I have one very, very, very important question for you. As Canada's boyfriend.
You know how that happened? The boyfriend name?
No.
Do you want to know how to?
Yeah.
So it was a joke. So I was on Much Music one day, and I remember being in the office, and they were giving me stories for Much News, the news show that I was doing. And they're like, oh, this person's dating this person. And I said, oh, my God, I don't want to tell another story about who's dating whom because I don't care. Like, unless you're sleeping with me, I don't care who it is. It's not my business, right? I don't care. So I went on the air, and it was like, oh, people care about boyfriends and girlfriends. And I just went on the air and said, oh, yeah, okay, I'm your boyfriend, Jordan. I just said that, just like that. And I did it a few times for fun. And then when I quit Much to go to CBC, one of the headlines in one of the print articles was "Bye Bye Boyfriend." That's all it said. And I just kind of laughed at it, and that was it. So then I did it on the air at CBC, again, as a joke. And I got a letter from a guy that said, don't call yourself my boyfriend because it confuses me. And I read that letter and I went, oh, screw it. I'm doing it every day after that. But what happens is the producers that I work with now hate it. They hate that I call myself that on air. And I do it just sometimes to piss them off, just for fun. Like, I love it, yeah. But it just totally started as a joke.
Okay. But the question is, my co-host and I, Lee, have been fighting over whose boyfriend you actually are, me or her. And so when you say into the camera, I'm your boyfriend, George Stroumboulopoulos, you're looking at me, right?
I think you guys know who I'm talking to. Whatever. If it feels true in your heart, then it's true.
It's true. Okay, well, thank you very much, George, for being here today.
What are you listening to now, music-wise?
Music-wise, oh my gosh, that's so putting me on the spot. I like Paramore, Black Keys. Yeah.
Have you ever heard of a band called The Replacements? So here's the thing with The Replacements. Their entire catalog is fine. People swear by them. I don't swear by their entire catalog. It doesn't always work for me. But they have a song called Election Day. If you like the Black Keys, you need to listen to this song, Election Day by The Replacements. It is where it's at.
Okay, thank you, George. Thank you for watching.